Morning, everyone. It's lovely to see names and faces of people from all over, friends from California and from here in Washington and in Massachusetts coming to join us today. Letting people into the waiting room or out of the waiting room. So today's poem is by a poet near and dear to my heart who isn't discussed as much as he once was. A poet of the mid-20th century by the name of Theodore Roethke. And I wanted to choose a poem of his that is often overlooked, a tiny poem of Roethke's that is not among those 4 or 5 that he's still remembered for, like The Waking, I Wake to Sleep and Take My Waking Slow, or My Papa's Waltz, or a few others. And this poem is called A Light Breather. I'll just share my screen so that you can see it. A light breather. The spirit moves yet stays, stirs as a blossom stirs, still wet from its bud sheath, slowly unfolding, turning in the light with its tendrils. Plays as a minnow plays, tethered to a limp weed, swinging, tail around, nosing in and out of the current, its shadows loose, a watery figure, moves like the snail still inward, taking and embracing its surroundings, never wishing itself away, unafraid of what it is, a music in a hood, a small thing singing. One more time. This is A Light Breather by Theodore Roethke. The spirit moves yet stays, stirs as a blossom stirs, still wet from its bud sheath, slowly unfolding, turning in the light with its tendrils, plays as a minnow plays, tethered to a limp weed swinging, tail around, nosing in and out of the current, its shadows loose, a watery finger, moves like the snail, still inward, taking and embracing its surroundings, never wishing itself away, unafraid of what it is, a music in a hood, a small thing singing. So if you could just take a comfortable seat, as we always do, straighten your back as best you can against the chair back. Flatten your feet on the floor, your knees at a right angle. Maybe raise your palms up on your lap. It's one of those beautifully gray early autumn days in Washington, where you go around, you're a light breather. The air is very heavy. taking the breath to 3 counts in and 4 counts out. Softening the shoulders, just letting them fall. Feeling the muscles in your face soften. Back of the neck, the shoulder blades, the lower back, and the psoas muscles in the lower back and in the belly. Really just feel where you are in your chair, in your seat. Putting your heart where your feet are, as Pema Chodron said. And when you get there, just deepen that breath a little bit more. 4 counts in, 5 counts out. Think of it as the heart going out to the rim. And then returning back to the hearth. Paul Simon said, "I don't have a friend who's not been battered," in his song American Tune. I think that's true. I could focus the Tonglen on anyone, and I would find in them something that's been battered. See if you can dedicate your breathing to someone who's been battered. It's breathing in the hurt or the suffering and breathing out compassion. A Light Breather by Theodore Roethke. The spirit moves, yet stays, stirs as a blossom stirs, still wet from its bud sheath, slowly unfolding, turning in the light with its tendrils, plays as a minnow plays, tethered to a limp weed swinging, tail around, nosing in and out of the current, its shadows loose, a watery finger, moves like the snail, still inward, taking and embracing its surroundings, never wishing itself away, unafraid of what it is, a music in a hood, a small thing singing. Roethke is a poet that probably many in the room here know well. Although, as I said at the beginning of the meditation, he's spoken of in the context of just a few poems anymore. Yet, at the time of the height of his popularity, he won a Pulitzer Prize and 2 National Book Awards in the 1950s. His Pulitzer Prize was for his greatest book, The Waking. And you might know My Papa's Waltz, or you might know I Wake to Sleep and Take My Waking Slow, the Waking poem. This is a lesser known poem, but it captures a lot of what Roethke was. There was a combination of a lightness of spirit and a heaviness of heart in Roethke. And he was known to be the best teacher of creative writing in his time, maybe of any time. Richard Hugo made that claim in The Triggering Town. So many of our poems today, the poems that we love and that we read with the thought that they arose out of some original space, came from things that Roethke invented. And so many of the poems that we've talked about so far this semester are about transcending a dichotomy, whether it be sorrow and wonder, whether it be the spider and the web, or whether it be the hearth of wisdom and the heart of compassion. I've tried to bring in poems that talk about a transcendence of that dichotomy into one gesture, which I think can be found in this poem too. The spirit moves and stays, he says in the poem. And I connect Roethke with something that William Blake said in The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, another kind of dichotomy arisen above the marriage of heaven and hell, where Blake says there is no difference between the body and the soul. The body is just that portion of the soul that we can perceive with our five senses. So for Blake, for Whitman, and for somebody like Roethke, the soul was everywhere. The soul was in the invisible, but the soul was also in the visible. It was just the part that we could perceive with our senses. And for those of you who know about Roethke, he earned that wisdom the hard way. He suffered from bipolar disorder, had manic episodes and deep depressions. And he died very young at 55, but he left quite a legacy. So in this poem, there's a minnow, and it's the image of the spirit, the playfulness of the spirit. It's a tiny image. It's a minnow in an enormous cathedral of a pond. And it's so similar to Whitman's spider. You even hear the echo about finding its place in its surroundings. It's just a tiny, tiny creature in an enormous cathedral. And at the same time, it's not afraid of what it is. It's hooking into the playfulness of life itself. It's like a Sufi dance, twirling and spiraling outward and outward. And Roethke played with perception this way. He liked to turn small things into universes. In another poem, he talks about a bud emerging from a dead cutting of a branch. And he says it brings forth its pale, tendrilless horn. He turns this tiny cellular bud still growing out of the dead thing into the horn of a giant creature. And you see in the share that I've included a fairly famous now image that came from the James Webb telescope. And I just wanted to leave the talk with that. There is this image within the image, if I can point it out. I don't know if you can see, but if you look at the 5 o'clock position of that sunburst, just below the 5 o'clock position here, there's a streak of red. And that streak of red is the earliest galaxy known. It's 300 million years, it's said, after the Big Bang. And it really shouldn't be there. And there's a star in the middle of it, a tiny point of light in the middle, which is called Earendel. And this early galaxy is called the Sunrise Arc. It's the most distant galaxy ever seen. What do you do in the face of that kind of enormity when science brings to us these images of ourselves that go deeper and farther back and into mysterious, inexplicable spaces? Do we apprehend that with fear and horror? Or like the minnow in the cathedral of the pond, is it possible to become more playful and to see ourselves in that enormity in disguise in a way that ennobles us and elevates us? I think that that's the point of Roethke's work in general, and certainly the point of this poem. So I'm gonna go back to the poem now and read it one more time. A light breather. The spirit moves, yet stays, stirs as a blossom stirs, still wet from its bud sheath, slowly unfolding, turning in the light with its tendrils, plays as a minnow plays, tethered to a limp weed swinging, tail around, nosing in and out of the current, its shadows loose, a watery finger moves like the snail still inward, taking and embracing its surroundings. There's Whitman right there. Taking and embracing its surroundings, never wishing itself away, unafraid of what it is. A music in a hood, a small thing singing. So let's go back into the meditation. Question for you to lead the second half here. Taking just a step back from your thoughts. As you relax into it, to find the space between the thoughts, even if it's just a flash. The question is pretty simple. It's, can you find the playfulness that's being described in this poem? Can you remember that playfulness? A time when you had to sing, not for a performance, but just because the only response to life was singing. You find your mind wandering. Remember that you're finding it is sati. That's remembering. That's mindfulness. Since we're talking about music, I think of Chet Baker's My Funny Valentine. That line, "You make me smile from my heart." It's one of my favorite exercises to carry away from meditation. To move a smile into my heart. And just bringing the breath back to 3 counts in and 4 counts out. And in the last minute, remember all that softening again. Soften the muscles of your face, your neck, your shoulders. The best help you can be to others is to be that presence in front of them. It's so hard for me, but I keep remembering, and I remember that in that act, I'm practicing mindfulness, even if I keep screwing up over and over again. A light breather. The spirit moves, yet stays. The spirit moves, yet stays. Stirs as a blossom stirs, still wet from its bud sheath, slowly unfolding, turning in the light with its tendrils. Plays as a minnow plays, tethered to a limp weed swinging, tail around, nosing in and out of the current, its shadows loose, a watery finger, moves like the snail, still inward, taking and embracing its surroundings, never wishing itself away, unafraid of what it is. A music in a hood, a small thing singing. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. Wonderful to see you all.
Thanks, David.